Let's remind ourselves about what's been happening. See how much you can remember. Jesus was betrayed by one of the 12 apostles. Here's Judas Iscariot, who had once been his friend. He betrayed Jesus to the Jewish leaders for 30 silver coins. Jesus was arrested and taken away. They put a blindfold on him and hit him. They said, "If you're so clever, Jesus, tell us which one of us hit you." They tied his hands together. They took him to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who sentenced him to death. They put a purple robe on him and a crown of thorns on his head, and then they pretended to worship him like a king, and they laughed at him, and they beat him again. And then they hung him on the cross with nails to die. And as he died, he said, "It is finished." Because Jesus knew that he had done the job that he had come to earth to do. Jesus died to take the punishment for every wrong thing that we do, so that we don't have to, because he loves us. Now there was a rich man called Joseph of Arimathea. Now he hadn't wanted Jesus to be killed, and he was upset about it. So he went to Pontius Pilate. "Pontius Pilate, I am a wealthy man, and I have a very good tomb cut into the rock. I was keeping it for myself when I die, but I would like to give it to Jesus. Please could I take his body and put it in my tomb?" "Yes, you can do that," said Pontius Pilate. So Joseph and his friend Nicodemus took Jesus' body to the tomb. Some of the women who'd been waiting at the foot of the cross when Jesus died followed them, and they saw where Jesus' body had been laid. One of them was called Mary Magdalene. Then Joseph wrapped Jesus' body in a burial cloth. And they put it into the tomb. And the women watched where they had put him. And then Joseph and Nicodemus rolled the stone across the entrance to the tomb. "Oh, this is heavy. Oh, this is very heavy. Oof, we did it." And the tomb was closed, and the women were still there watching where they had put Jesus' body. Now, some of the Jewish leaders had heard a rumour about Jesus. "You know that Jesus, you know what he said? He said he was going to rise from the dead." I know, he did say that, didn't he? And they said to each other, "Well, you know, we've got rid of him. We don't want his disciples to come and steal the body and then pretend he has risen from the dead. No, if that happens, then people will stop listening to us again." So they arranged for some guards to guard the entrance. It was a very sad day. Then at sunrise on the Sunday morning, the women who had seen where Jesus' body had been laid, including Mary Magdalene, decided to go to the tomb, and they took some spices with them to put on Jesus' body, because that is what people did in those days. But I'm a bit worried about who we might be able to get to help us roll the stone away from the entrance. Yes, me too, actually. It is very heavy. Well, perhaps the soldiers might help us. But when they arrived with their spices, what do you think had happened? The soldiers were nowhere to be seen. The tomb was open, and when they looked inside, Jesus' body was gone. All that was there was the neatly folded grave clothes inside. Well, the women were so upset. Who's taken Jesus' body? Where have they put it? But then an angel appeared. Now remember, an angel is what we call a messenger from God. And the angel said to them, "Don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. But he isn't here. He has risen. Go and tell his disciples." Well, Mary Magdalene did just as the angel had told her and ran off to tell the disciples. So Mary Magdalene found some of the disciples. "Jesus has gone. An angel said that he's risen from the dead. What do you think? I mean, we went to the tomb to anoint his body with spices, but when we got there, the tomb was empty and Jesus was gone." Well, some of the disciples didn't believe Mary at first. Well, perhaps you made a mistake. But Peter immediately ran off towards the tomb, and then John ran after him. Now, John was a faster runner than Peter, and he overtook Peter and got to the tomb first. But he didn't go in. He waited until Peter had caught him up. Shall we go and look then? Yes, let's look. So they went and they looked inside the tomb. But of course the tomb was empty. The body was gone, and all that was left was the folded grave clothes, neatly folded inside. And John looked and he said, I believe Jesus has risen from the dead." And then Peter and John went home. Now meanwhile, Mary Magdalene, who had caught them up again by then, was feeling very, very upset. And she stayed by the tomb, and she turned and she just sat and she cried. And then she heard a man's voice behind her. "Why are you crying?" She said, "They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've put him." You see, she thought he was the gardener. "If you've taken the body away, please tell me where you've put him so I can go to him." "Mary," said the man's voice, and Mary turned around. And there was Jesus. It was Jesus who had spoken to her. He really had risen from the dead, and he was standing right behind her. "Jesus!" "Don't touch me yet," he said. "I have to go back to my Father in heaven first." Later that evening, Jesus' disciples were together in a locked room, all except Thomas. Thomas wasn't with them. They'd locked the doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, and suddenly Jesus appeared. Now, they shouldn't have been surprised that Jesus could get through locked doors. He is Jesus after all. Getting through locked doors is no trouble for him. They were overjoyed to see him. He really had risen. He really was alive to get again. And that's the story of the very first Easter Sunday. But I must tell you one more thing. Later on, after Jesus had gone again, Thomas came back and the others said, "Jesus is alive. We've seen him. He really is." "I don't believe it was really him," said Thomas, "unless I actually see him and actually see his wounds. I can't believe it was really him. A week later, they were together again, with Thomas this time, and Jesus appeared again. "Thomas," said Jesus, "here are the nail marks. Here are my wounds. Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas knew that it was true, and he said, "My Lord and my God." So the important things to remember from this week's story are this: Jesus did not stay dead. He rose again and is alive today. You see, death has no power over Jesus. Jesus actually has power over death. And if we put our trust in Jesus now, he will not only help us through this life, but we will have eternal life in heaven too, with him. And now we're going to do our craft to help us remember the story and to tell it to other people.